Welcome to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein, talking about the evolutionary, the revolutionary, the inspiration and the perspiration, and those aha moments that change everything. And now here's your host, Rich Goldstein.
Rich Goldstein here, host of the Innovations and Breakthroughs podcast, where I feature top leaders and the path they took to create change. Past guests include Joe Polish, Ryan Dice, and Roland Frazier. This episode is brought to you by my company, Goldstein Patent Law, where we help you to protect your ideas and products. We've advised and obtained patents for thousands of companies over the past 27 years. So if you're a company that has software, a product, or a design you want protected, go to goldsteinpatentlaw.com, where there are amazing free resources for learning about the patent process. And you could email my team at welcome@goldsteinpc.com to explore if it's a match to work together. You could also check out the book I wrote for the American Bar Association that explains in plain English how patents work. It's called the ABA Consumer Guide to Obtaining a Patent. I have with me here today Joe DeMaria. Joe started out in internet marketing in 2011, and after several unsuccessful attempts at developing his own online course, Joe developed dynamic Ascension Training. And since then, Joe has become one of the most sought after course creation consultants on the planet. Very pleased to welcome here today my good friend, Joe DeMaria. Welcome, Joe.
Hey, thanks, Rich. I've been excited about this conversation all week. So thanks for having me.
Awesome. Yeah, my pleasure. And so, Joe, how did you get started as an entrepreneur?
Completely by accident. I think actually I didn't even know people could be entrepreneurs until I was starting a business, but I'd flirted with it many times as a kid. I started a little cartel of kids selling sodas and candy when there was a sugar ban that hit our local school district as a child. I think it was around 9. It didn't last very long, but we made almost $1,000. And my mother still keeps the ledger. She's very proud of the ledger that I had at 9. So that's one of her prized possessions to this day. But
you mean the public ledger, right? You had 2 set of books, didn't you?
Of course. Yeah. I was paying, in my infinite wisdom at 9, I was paying some 9-year-old lieutenants, friends of mine, to steal sodas from their family homes. And I was paying them like a quarter a unit basically, and selling everything for $1 or $2. So it was a racket, but yeah, we wanted to make sure we had to keep everything neat in case we got audited.
Right. And it's funny. And I think you were caught selling A&W root beer, right?
Well, so I wasn't, but the whole house of cards came tumbling down when, oh, there you go. You have one with you today. See,
I was drinking one already as I read that.
See, you're the guy. If you had just played it a little bit cooler and made sure we didn't do that,
you would have stolen mine and sold it.
That's right. If you didn't get caught doing the hand-to-hand on CCTV, we would have all gotten away with it. But
right. You'd be like, yeah, hey guys, I know where I can find an A&W. It's in Rich's office.
Oh yeah, there were custom orders. There was all types of stuff that we were doing. It was I didn't even realize that this was a business. It was just a little hustle that I'd made up on the spot.
Nice. And so, after that, after that fun experience, what other businesses did you find yourself in?
Legal or illegal? I talk about it now because, hey, state of New York, the statute of limitations is up. But I got involved in the fake ID thing when I was in college, and then I got roped into all different kinds of these little hustles on the side as a kid, just because I didn't even know what I was doing was legal or illegal. There were just opportunities and holes that I saw in the market. There was for example, like, this is just a silly thing that still makes me laugh today. But when I moved to New York, I noticed all of these kids were getting fake IDs, and they were all getting them from the same place, this Chinese company. And the way that it always worked was it was like $450 to get your fake ID through these people. But if you went in bulk and you got a few of your buddies together, you get a better deal. So I reached out to this Chinese company and basically asked them if they'd ever had a reseller, right? I didn't even know what a reseller was, but essentially it's what I was asking them, a representative in the field in New York that could go around and sell on their behalf. And they said, sure. So I started going in and putting together groups of 10, 20, 30 people that would all be paying my white labeled company $200 instead of $450. They would submit on their own and I would just batch them and I would pay $50 a head. And I was making thousands of dollars a month going around Queens. And I painted the wall of my apartment DMV like white gray in New York, and I had the Nikon camera, taking the pictures, taking the money, sending it to China, the whole shebang. And it just kind of, again, it was just something that sort of happened overnight. The bright idea that was less than legal, but I just found myself in the middle of the maelstrom very quickly.
Right. And then eventually you found yourself in internet marketing.
Absolutely. Like most internet marketers, you start as a criminal. No, I ended up meeting a whole bunch of marketers when I was probably 18. And I was doing I dropped out of college to go start a marketing agency in Silicon Valley where I grew up. And I was heavily studying anybody in the world of online marketing at the time because, well, in 2010, 2011, that was still a pretty wide open frontier. And of course, I met people like Perry Belcher and Ryan Deiss and all these different people that were, became fixtures of my career, my life over the next decade or so. And what I realized very quickly was, for me, the big innovation wasn't actually in applying all the brand new crazy stuff people were coming out with. It was finding ways to take that stuff, but strategically align everything to a company that would have functioned very well in like 1965. So many companies were blowing up over and over again at the time because they married the newest idea, the newest trend, the newest piece of tech for their marketing or for their launches or their sales. But they were all kind of built on houses of cards. They, as soon as the next innovation came, they were orphaned, right? They were stuck out in the wind. And I watched so many agencies, so many entrepreneurs fail in those first few years that were like the cutting edge, coolest guys, and they were gone within 18 months, 24 months. And that was a really, really big lesson. It was part of what really shaped my agency and what I ended up doing.
Cool. And so then eventually you got into creating online courses, and in particular, really helping people to tease out the content that's existing in their brain that they kind of have struggled to structure into a course. Is that kind of it?
Yeah. And want to talk about the general theme of my career so far is you wake up in an entirely different situation than you were in before, and you just kind of didn't realize it. So as part of internet marketing, anybody can tell you in the early, 2010, 11, 12, there was this whole thing about online courses, and they were starting to they were like this whisper in the wind that this was going to be a big opportunity. And so I had a ton of clients that would come to us and say, hey, can you help us make this thing? And the answer, of course, is yes. I agree to stuff because I think it's fun and entertaining. I don't necessarily need to know, but we'll figure it out, especially in my early 20s. And we started playing around with all these online learning formats, and we realized that nobody really had a good method for this thing. Everybody was just really bad at it. Rich, I don't know if you remember taking any courses in like 2010, but they were horrific. I mean, there was just no method to the madness. So it took a few years of us experimenting with it, and I ended up creating a different way of teaching online, just a curriculum structure that we could give to literally anybody. So far, right? I'm sure someone will defy me one day, but so far we've been able to give it to literally anybody and have them take these really complex things that, hard-won knowledge over decades that they've earned and accrued, pull it out of their brain and put it into an easy format that's actually teachable. And the results kind of spoke for themselves. Like industry average when we started was anywhere between 6 and 15% completion rate on those programs. Ours were routinely in 60 to 70% range. And when you're looking at things like graduation rates, implementation, things like that, ours are typically 2 to 3 times higher than university level, which is hilarious because I'm a college dropout. So now I'm working with universities and corporations and entrepreneurs to improve their online learning because the system that we made is just, it's different.
Wow. And so, and what you did then successfully was you innovated how courses were put together, presented, which resulted in people consuming that much more of them than they normally would. Like normally, very few people would complete the course, and you found a way to make it, I guess, a better fit so that people tended to complete the course where they didn't previously.
Totally. I mean, and so you've made online programs before. Like I know that, and you're a hell of a teacher. I mean, you're a good speaker. You've got all this experience. That it feels different when you're on stage and you're speaking and you're teaching in that format than when you're doing it on camera, right? Like the stickiness and like the social pressure of actually paying attention to somebody in the room is very different than when you're just like on your computer at home and the dog's barking and
And if
phones
for no other reason, it's because it's live and it's here now and gone in a moment. Where as if it's recorded, then there's a million excuses of why not now, why it could be
Absolutely
consumed later, and then later becomes never.
So blow that up into COVID, and every university in the world suddenly goes digital. And all that social pressure we have as students, right? Sitting in a classroom in a lecture hall, having to pay attention, because if we don't get it right now in this very moment, then this class is over, this lecture's done. I've got a test coming up and I'm SOL, right? I'm done. Well, you move all those into online. These kids now have like, 48 windows open, YouTube's on, they're listening to music, they're playing video games, they're watching TV, they're hanging out with people. Like they're not present. There's not that social pressure. In order to make that content work, we had to innovate not just the structure of curriculum, but really how we teach online. Just as a format has to be totally different. And that's really the thing that we hit on over the past, 6 or 7 years. And it just so happened to, if you want to like catch the wave, the best way to do that is to just be sitting out in the ocean way before the waves come. Just trying to show up right on time is very difficult. So we were just lucky to be out there really early and have a good reputation for this,
Yeah, that's great. And so I think that's a good segue into kind of what you're doing now with online learning. And like there's new innovations that you're a part of, and to a new movement in terms of content creation. So tell me about that.
Yeah. Online learning became a really big passion of mine, largely as a dropout. I think every college dropout has a bone to pick with academia in some way, shape, or form, whether it's the price or the structure or the curriculum itself. Like we've all got some kind of grudge that we hold, or an axe to grind. And for me, I've looked at the rising rates of tuitions, and I've looked at the amount of kids that I see that come out of university now with like hundreds of thousands of dollars of debt. That average, I don't know if you know this, but within 24 months, they on average make $21 an hour with an average debt of $150,000. So you can imagine, just these kids are set up for failure from the off. And so one of the things that I was looking at, and it kind of was a perfect confluence, is I've always wanted to change the way online education works. And a good mutual friend of ours is actively working with corporations now to make them the next generation of educators rather than academics. So it totally fit my ethos of trying to put the burden, the price burden or the cost burden of education, take it off the shoulders of the students and to start placing it onto, corporations, or placing it onto these third parties to sort of alleviate some of that tug that's happening right now. And it just so happened that, a good friend of ours was doing it, and I've been trying to do it on my own for years, but he is, an amazing entrepreneur with an incredible amount of experience. He sold he sold a company to Richard Branson and ran it for him. He wrote Yahoo's first business plan. Like, he's a storied entrepreneur. And it's really been very cool to kind of sit there and be kind of a co-pilot and work in a partnership to go start moving the needle there. Cause I don't think I'd be able to do it on my own.
Wow, that sounds amazing, and excited to see that unfold. I'd see if we shift a little bit towards kind of where many other entrepreneurs might be, like where many other innovators might be, having their first idea, their first innovation that they're looking to turn into their first business, perhaps. It's like, what do you think that these entrepreneurs need to have in mind before they jump toward just kind of pushing it out into the world?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I would tell you that pretty much universally, whether you're a day one entrepreneur or you're 20 years into being an entrepreneur, if you're at 100,000 a year or 5,000 a year or $1 million a year, you pretty much have the same problem, right? Because all of us want to go to the next level. Next level is always relative, doesn't matter. For a Rich Goldstein, the next level looks very different than somebody that's 2 years into their career. But all of us are always looking for that next thing. The biggest issue is that there's a ton of information out there, and we can get really stuck thinking that there's all these things we have to do before we can progress, or there's all these things that must be done, right? Because there's so many cool, fun things that you're learning on the internet about marketing your stuff, selling your stuff, branding, all of these different things that can kind of make your head spin. The biggest thing that I think all entrepreneurs need at every level is a better filter, right? The reality is scaling a business is really, really intentional work. There needs to be a strategy. There needs to be an overall vision that we're building to. And I think when we first start, I know personally for myself, and I don't know if you would agree with this, Rich, from your experience, when I started my companies, as like my first couple, I had no idea what I wanted my long-term to look like. So I was just doing things. And while it would grow and it would make money, because I didn't have an overarching goal or a strategy or an idea of where I was piloting it, almost always it would fail, right? I could make hundreds of thousands of dollars in a really short period of time, but in the long run, everything died. And part of it was I was serving growth, but there's a huge difference between growth and scale. Scale is architectural, right? It's building a great foundation. It's knowing where you're going. And the reality is, I think most entrepreneurs, even ones that you and I are friends with today that are very, very successful, they all are asking the same question, which is, how do I scale to the next level? And it's almost always an architecture issue, not get more sales, not spend more money on marketing, not hire a PR agent.
Yeah. And so it's a matter of, I guess, kind of having the right strategy. And so you mentioned the difference between scale and growth. It almost seems like the difference between tactics and strategy, right? It's like,
Sure. I mean, give you an example. And this will, probably hit home for a lot of folks. Most of you don't know that Starbucks almost went out of business in like 1997. Right? Why? Because they grew too fast. Their CEO at the time, he had a memo leaked, and his memo was basically lamenting all of the mistakes they'd made in going from 3,000 stores to 13,000, and how all of the things that they'd done in service of growth had prevented them from being a scalable company. They had to go from 13,000 stores back down to 6, right? They had to fire thousands of employees, publicly embarrass themselves, and walk back several years of quote unquote innovation because they'd served growth, but they'd had paid no attention to the actual strategic foundation that they'd built. And there's tons of case studies on that. Kodak did the same thing. They served growth, but they weren't scalable. Kodak decided that they were they were told to invest in digital in 1981. 1981, they were told they had a 10-year window by a market analyst they hired, and their board ignored them. Fuji Films came out and became a titan in that 10-year window. Kodak still ignored them, and instead of admitting their mistake, they turned around and said, oh, you know what? We're not a photography company. We're a paper and chemicals company. And they bought Sterling for like 1.2 billion, and they sold it like 10 years later for 200 million or something crazy. They doubled down on this completely unintelligent strategy because it was growing, but it didn't serve their long-term goal of being a healthy, stable company. And you just see companies grow to death every day. The startup world is rife with them.
And so I guess part of that is there's a difference between growth and longevity. So
Right.
It's like what's going to help you grow isn't necessarily going to be sustainable or have you around.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When I talk about this, I always say it's like, okay, Rich, let's say you built yourself a beautiful new house and it's one story and it's a sprawling, amazing estate, right? That's awesome. If next year comes and you want to add a story to it, great. That's growth. Well, now we have a second floor, and so far, so good. If another year passes and you want to add a third story to the sprawling, miraculous estate, okay, we can do it. But maybe in the middle of the night, you start hearing some strange noises, some creaking, some things you don't love. If year 4 comes around and you add another story to it, and all of a sudden the whole thing collapses one night, that's because there's a big difference between growth and scale, right? Scaling is an architectural thing. If you wanted to build something that tall, it would have needed to be designed that way from the beginning or retrofitted completely to be able to sustain that level of growth. And a lot of us don't think that way. We just pour gasoline on the fire.
It's that damn sunroom we put in on the first floor. It just wasn't built to put on a third and a fourth story.
It just couldn't do it. Yeah. And that's the reality. Is like, when I work with most entrepreneurs now, or I meet friends and we talk over coffee about what's happening in their businesses, almost always I can point to an architectural issue, not a growth issue. Growth is an equation most of us can solve, but scale is a strategy.
I love it. A really, really awesome concept and notion for anyone to think about. Really, anyone who is jumping into starting their business with an eye on growth should be thinking about this and should be thinking about their strategy for scaling. Now, if people want to learn more about you, get in touch with you, Joe, how do they go about doing so?
There's a couple places you can head. On Instagram, which I'll admit I spend almost no time on social media, so shoot your shot, but chances are pretty low. But you can go to @GetMoreJoe on Instagram and message me there, or you can jump onto our website.
The question is, are they really going to get more Joe?
Well, it used to be true. If you go to social media, you might get less Joe. I think Rich knows that I'm a very anti-social media person. But you can go to our website.
Media. That's a funny before and after. That's worthy of Wheel of Fortune.
Oh, I know.
Anti-social media.
We should build an anti-social media. It's like you make your own profile. Maybe that's our innovation together, Rich. We make anti-social media for introverts where nobody else can see your profile. It's completely anonymous. That sounds great, actually.
Yeah. Okay. So then, I totally interrupted you in terms of like the answering the question. So it was, people want to learn more about you, get in touch with you. Then first of all, there's Get More Joe on Instagram, and
there's you can go to www.teachtoscale.com. And that's TO, not the number 2. And Rich, don't worry about interrupting me. We've been friends long enough. I know it comes with the territory with both of us. So it's just part of how it works.
Put a couple of ADD guys together and that's what you get.
Exactly. Take them off their meds and the bedlam breaks loose.
Yeah, forget it. All right. Well, cool. Well, Joe, I appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. and kind of share some of your past story and your experience, and really some of what will help entrepreneurs to not get stuck. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. It's my pleasure, man.
Okay. Have a great day.
Thanks for listening to Innovations and Breakthroughs with your host, Rich Goldstein. Be sure to click subscribe, check us out on the web at innovationsandbreakthroughs.com, and we'll see you next time.